Welcome to Catholic Ed for All, your weekly insight into topics of special education in Catholic schools. My name is Dr. Raul Escarpio, and I invite you to join me each week as we learn how to be more inclusive in Catholic schools and continue to live out St. John Paul II's message of open wide the doors to Christ. Many thanks go out to RCL Benzinger, who is generously sponsoring this podcast. RCL Benzinger enriches the worldwide Catholic community by providing the most engaging and highest quality resources, programs, and services rooted in the rich and diverse tradition of the Catholic faith. And now, on to our show. On the show today, I am joined by Maggie Hubbard, former Director of Special Education for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. Schools, and currently a coach with Academy of Catholic Educators, ACE, at Notre Dame of Maryland. Hello, Maggie. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Raul. I'm very happy to be here with you.
I am delighted to have you. Maggie, can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I spent 30 years working for the Archdiocese of Washington as a teacher, an administrator, and then as the Director for Special Education. I am absolutely passionate about inclusive education in Catholic schools. I believe completely and totally that Catholic schools are the appropriate place for students with special needs. I am an excited new coach of teachers, and then on the personal side, I'm a proud mom of 4, grandma of 5, and my husband Steve and I have been married for 43 years.
Wow, fantastic. Hearing you say that you have a passion for kids with special needs, you're like my sister from another mother. I love hearing you say that. So, Maggie, as a former SPED teacher, and myself, and you as a SPED director, I'm sure you got some stories. You got some war stories about kids that you worked with. Can you share some of your experiences as a former SPED director?
Sure. I think that my experiences with as a special education director, I've seen a little bit of everything, successes and struggles. I think that my excitement, the things that were the most fun in that job were those opportunities where I got to go into the schools and sit down with teachers, and we could push our sleeves up and we could problem solve. And I could give them the confidence to go in and work with kids that they were uncomfortable with, and then be successful. Because when they were successful, then all of a sudden it demystified the whole thing. It was like, oh, I can do this. So there were disappointments, times where things didn't work. But then the other part of doing this job and being a special educator is that opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, that this is an opportunity to grow. This is a place where we can say, what didn't go well in this situation? And what can we change so that the next child who looks like this one will be more successful with? So I think we've had, I have been really, really proud of some of the successes that we've had and how flexible some of the schools have been in order to help kids. And that shows what special education is all about. It's sometimes just about being creative. And while I knew that coming into this job, spending 6 years really in the trenches with it showed it to me all the more.
Absolutely. Fantastic comments. Fantastic. So let's talk about your experiences helping students with these special needs, especially learning to read. Can you tell me some details about when you were a first grade teacher, and then later on how you were helping these students learn to read?
Sure. Any area in particular, or shall I try to?
Let's be broad. Go broad at first, and then just make it detailed if you want.
One of the things that I really felt was important as a first grade teacher, because I think that this is true in any grade, but I particularly thought it was important when I was working with early readers, was the opportunity for them to hear and for me to model what good reading was. So one thing I spent a lot of time doing was shared reading, and giving them the chance to hear me read. I did lots and lots of think alouds so that I could model what problem solving was. You know, this is how this is a tough word. What are the things I can do to figure out what this word is? And you know, I'm thinking this about what's going on in this story. What are you thinking? So, and then I was also modeling fluency and how you pause at periods, how you raise your voice at question marks, raising your voice to get excited about things. So that I thought was absolutely essential to that broad idea about what does it look like and sound like for an experienced reader. Obviously, in the lower grades, there is a focus on letter-sound relationship and breaking the code, helping kids understand that, in fact, that's one way to learn how to read. And of course, that is often a place where our kids with disabilities struggle. They have trouble understanding all of those sound symbol relationships and how things blend together, how the sounds blend together to make words. It doesn't always make sense to them. And so, as a teacher of young early readers, trying to help them see that the way the code works and how putting all those sounds together make words that you know, and that those words are the ones that are on the page, and that's how we read. That's how it all comes together. Obviously, working on sight vocabulary, I loved having word walls in my classroom. I will say a lot of times I see word walls in classrooms now, and I don't think that teachers necessarily use them to their best advantage, because they should be interactive. They should grow. They should reflect what the kids are seeing and reading about on a daily basis. So I found my word wall to be extremely important in helping with sight vocabulary, but also making sense of the language that the children were seeing when they were reading. And then also giving kids an opportunity to read at their level, and making sure that they were having opportunities to both work at within their zone of proximal development, but also giving them a chance to read something that they actually could read and feel successful, like I am a reader. Because that's, if they go into it and think that they're not a reader, then we've got two battles to fight. One is the fact that they might be struggling, and another is the fact that they don't think they can do it.
Absolutely. But those early successes, Maggie, and I know you hit upon it, but I want to reiterate those early successes with students, whether they are typical or they are exceptional learners, are necessary to build those blocks on. And just the fact that they can track left to right is an early success for a student, correct?
Right.
Just the fact
Exactly.
that they can read those sight words, those Deutsch words, or just read the word "the" in a sentence when it's when they'll be seeing it a lot, is a success, and we need to build upon that. I think a lot of times we as teachers get frustrated over what they can't do rather than what they can do immediately.
Right, and you build on what they can. You figure out what they can do, and that's what you build on. I used to, if I had trouble finding a book that a child could read, I wrote my own book for them. I would sit down and figure out, okay, what are some words that they know? What are some things that they can decode? I would write a book for them. And then they had something, and they could take that book home and they could read it over and over again, and they could use it as a model for writing. That was the basis for them being able to grow and, like I said, see themselves as a reader.
And to piggyback on that as well, we have a lot of students that are not maybe not be developmentally ready to get all those skills
Hmm.
where they are. And I want to caution my early childhood teachers and tell you what you already know. Sometimes they may not be at that level yet developmentally for them to be able to grasp the concepts. Is that right?
Right. That's absolutely right. And that's why it's important that teachers have to be detectives when it comes to their students and try to figure out what that zone of proximal development is. Where is it that they actually are? So, that assessment piece is vital, so that you can make sure that you're not pushing them beyond what they can do, because then they get discouraged. And again, like I said, if they don't feel like this is something that is possible for them, then you run into those problems of of their self-doubt, and that becomes almost a bigger problem than possibly lack of skill.
Look at Maggie throwing Vygotsky out there today. Look at everyone.
Hey,
Look at,
you know what? You gotta love Lev Vygotsky.
yes, you do. And speaking of theories, let's talk about some sound strategies because you and I can go back and forth on developmental levels and successes, but we know Catholic school teachers are teachers first, and they're very practical teachers. So let's
Right.
offer some sound strategies for them. And if you want, we can pick one of the big areas that you'd like to talk about. You can do fluency, you can do comprehension, you can do phonemic awareness. Just pick one and let's just go. Let's help them out a little bit with some strategies.
Well, let me do a little bit, maybe a little bit of phonemic awareness and a little bit of fluency. I always, obviously, you teach sounds, um, and you teach blending. And so when I was working with blending, I really liked Elkonin boxes, and that's kind of an old, that's been around for a long time. But if your readers haven't been introduced to them, it's something to look into, because then what you do is you take something that's completely auditory and may not make a lot of sense, and you can make it visual and kinesthetic, because you with every sound you push a token into a box, and the kids can see how the sounds blend together. So I had a lot of success with Elkonin boxes, to the point that I even had kids who would create them themselves, and particularly kids that were struggling with that. The other thing I always have liked is rhymes and onsets. There's some kids that just are not going to be able to be effective blenders, and so when you put a rhyme together, and they can take a look at part of the word as a single unit and not have to worry about trying to blend each sound, it makes it more accessible to them. And then the nice thing about that is I used to have anchor words. So, our anchor word for the at words. Here's our anchor for the ed words, things like that, so that they could get an opportunity to, basically, you're only having to blend two things together. And then that also gave them, when you're reading and you hit a word that you don't know, you can say that the kids don't know. We want them to get to the point where they can say to themselves, is there something about that word that I can see that I know? And if you've taught them about chunks, which would be part of the rhyme, then look for those. And in terms of fluency, I found repeated readings to be very, very important. Yes, particularly if you do it over several readings, the kids get to the point that there is a level of comfort with the text. And yeah, in some situations they may have already memorized it, but then what they're doing is they are experiencing fluency, and they are experiencing what it feels like to be a fluent reader. And that's what their goal is. We want them to get to the point where they're reading so easily it sounds almost memorized. But when they are struggling with some of the vocabulary and they can't decode it, or they don't get that cadence, repeated readings are vital to that ability to be able to to read fluently and to practice it. And then also it works on their sight vocabulary, because when you have them doing the repeated reading, you're also having them track, you're having them make sure that they're focusing on the words. So those were a couple of things that I found to be extremely successful. Also making that connection to writing, I think, is making sure you have a reading writing connection is, I think, important for kids.
Fantastic. I'm a big fan of repeated readings. And if I can also add, when you say that it teaches them to be fluent in a passage, it also teaches them what a passage should sound like when it's being read.
Right.
All those times. I mean, something as simple as that. People can say, "Well, duh," and we're like, "Well, yeah," because maybe they haven't been exposed to what a passage should sound like when they're reading it themselves. So, I mean, just to gain those early successes is necessary.
Right. And I want to emphasize, these are all strategies that you use with all kids. These aren't things that you just do with kids with special needs.
Yes.
This is, there's so much about what we do as teachers that are standard operating procedures that are good for all kids that are struggling and kids that aren't struggling. So you have to remember that the bags of tricks we come in with are often the same tricks that are used by special educators.
You hear that, everybody? It isn't only for our babies. It isn't only for our kids with special needs. These strategies work for all. Maggie, agree with me. If we differentiate for one, we differentiate for everybody, right?
That's absolutely right.
Absolutely. Maggie, before I let you go, because, I mean, obviously, you know what you're talking about, and we can spend a lifetime talking about this. Maggie, what should Catholic special education look like?
Catholic special education should look like love. I know that's very broad, but
no, it's not. It's fantastic. Go ahead.
That's what it's all about. We Catholic schools, I think, are uniquely situated to be places for students where students with special needs can succeed because of the fact that we are called to look in the faces of every one of our students and see Christ. And we are called to help all of our students reach their full potential. And I know that's, when you're sitting in the classroom and you've got a lot of things going on and it seems hard, it's hard. But what gets us to come back is the call to love. And I think that's the piece that we as Catholic educators bring to the table that is unique to us.
Fantastic. What a beautiful thought. Beautiful. Maggie, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with you and thoroughly enjoyed you sharing with our audience and learning a few things from you, from your experiences. I thank God that you joined us today. I offer you nothing but prayers and blessings as you continue your mission as a former director and now a coach. I'm sure those teachers are going to be blessed to have you. I thank you
so much. It's been great.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless you, and I hope you have a great day. Well, that's it for this week. If this podcast was a blessing to you, can you please head over to iTunes and subscribe and give us a review or a rating? It really does help other Catholic educators find the podcast and use it as a resource. Thanks again to the amazing people at RCL Benziger for generously sponsoring this podcast. Check out their new resource for Catholic schools, Blessed Are We, Faith in Action, which enables teachers to share the love of Christ with children who have special needs. Visit rclbenziger.com to learn more. Join me again next time as we continue to advance God's kingdom by including all of God's children in Catholic schools and faith formation. Until then, this is Dr. Raul Escarpio. Thanks for listening, and may God bless your day.